Yo, what's going on, guys? It's Houston Sports Talk, back another video day. And today the Houston Texans beat the Jacksonville Jaguars 24-20. Good win for the Texans. I'm not going to say great win because this was not a great win. This was a win that the Texans had to fight for. And really, if you ask me, I think a win that this should have been a way easier game for the Houston Texans to win. But penalties were a big problem in this game. Mainly holding. I mean, we did see a lot of false starts. As I believe, like Tunsil's at like 12 penalties, or 12 or 13 now on the year. The offensive line has been terrible with penalties, and that was a big frustration in this game. Obviously, I think another big frustration in this game, which really hurt the Houston Texans, was right in the beginning of this game, we saw a muffed punt by Steven Sims, which then led to a Brian Thomas touchdown, which is the first score of this game. That changes the whole mentality of this football game, because the Jaguars only have 13 points on the board if it isn't for that touchdown and the muffed punt by Steven Sims. Even though we saw such a terrible performance by the offensive line, and the defense from time to time had some really, really bad struggles, although they had some good moments too. I really loved the moment when the Texans were able to stop the Jaguars on fourth down at the 1 yard line. Really reminded me a lot. It's a little bit different, but really reminded me a lot like last year when the Texans were playing the Jaguars here in Houston, and we saw the situation where at the end of the first half, with 1 second left at the 1 yard line, the Texans had to stop the Jaguars, and they got that done. Now it's a little bit different and I think this was a lot harder because in this situation, it's four plays the Texans have to stop the Jaguars. So it was just one play that the Texans had to stop. But back-to-back years in Houston, the Houston Texans have key moments stopping the Jacksonville Jaguars at the 1 yard line. And even though the offensive line was terrible, absolutely terrible, and Steven Sims was terrible with the muff punt, and the defense made their mistakes from time to time, CJ Stroud and Nico Collins were unbelievable in this game. Now, I'm going to say something. Offensive line, sorry, I'm going to say it, they have sucked this season. The refs, in my opinion, sucked in this game as well. Look, I'm not saying the penalties that were being called on the Texans were not penalties, because they were. Tunsil was holding. I actually thought there were a couple of calls that they didn't make on Tunsil. There were other guys holding. It was terrible. And the fact that CJ Stroud went out there and still got this win makes me more impressed with him as a quarterback. Now, I was impressed with CJ, but the team, with the way they played off with the offensive line and some of the defensive plays and the special teams, at times in this game, that really, I didn't really love the team performance. But I look at two guys like CJ Stroud and Nico Collins, and they were fantastic. For these two guys to carry the Texans to a win, when the offensive line was setting them back so much. Very impressed with CJ. 345, 2 touchdown passes, 27 for 40, 12 receptions, and 151 receiving yards and 1 touchdown for Nico Collins. I'm going to say it, and I'm not going to say that Nico Collins is the best wide receiver in the NFL, because I look at guys like Tyreek Hill and Justin Jefferson and CeeDee Lamb, who are just absolutely insane. But I believe Nico Collins is a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL, which I don't think a lot of people probably have him in their top 5. And as of right now, he is the best wide receiver in football. Now, that doesn't mean that he's better than Justin Jefferson overall, or he's better than Tyreek Hill or CeeDee Lamb overall. But with the way things have gone through the first 4 games of the season, Nico Collins is the best wide receiver in the NFL. 3 out of his 4 games, he's gone over 100. This one was 150. Against the Bears, I think he went for like 120 or 125. The Colts was like 115 or 120. He's been absolutely insane. He had like 340 receiving yards going into this game. Now he is at almost 500 receiving yards 4 games in the season, has 3 touchdown receptions. He's absolutely killing it for this Texans team. All right, I want to go to the scoring summary, though. Scoring started off with Trevor Lawrence throwing a 2-yard touchdown pass to Brian Thomas Jr., his second touchdown of his career, 7-0. Stephon Diggs, how about this? 6-yard touchdown run for Diggs. Obviously his performance is not talked about a lot because of how big of a day Nico had, but Diggs was great. This is surprisingly not really surprisingly, but Diggs' first touchdown run of his career. 7-7. Then Cam Little with a 41-yarder to make it 10-7. But C.J. Stroud throws a 3-yard touchdown pass to Nico Collins, 14-10. Cam Little with a 52-yard field goal to make it 14-13. Jacksonville would cut the lead down to 1. Farron Barron going in halftime would make a 30-yarder, his only kick of the day, 17-13. And then we would see a Trevor Lawrence touchdown pass to Christian Kirk for 8 yards to make it 20-17. Jacksonville would get their first lead since 10-7. And then C.J. Stroud would throw a 1-yard touchdown pass to the former Jacksonville Jaguar, Dare Ngobalowe. Man, did Dare have a great game in this one. He had an amazing 30-plus yard catch for the Texans on a 3rd down and 18, which was huge. 24-20 after the touchdown. And like I mentioned, I want to go back to it. There were a bunch of flags. When I say the refs were terrible, and I don't know if I've been talking so much, I don't know if I was able to get to this, but I thought there were a lot of plays, even though the offensive line, was terrible, and I believe the officials were making the right calls there. I think there were a lot of flags missed that the Jacksonville Jaguars committed. I thought there was a clear pass interference on one of the last drives on a throw that was incomplete to Robert Woods. I thought there were a lot of missed calls that the Texans were not getting. So I think the officials were doing a good job with the flags that were being called, that the offensive line were making, because if you look at it, there were clear holdings, clear false starts. But I thought there were a lot of flags that the Jaguars committed that were not called, were not thrown. And one of them at the end was, I believe, a pass interference, on Robert Woods that was not called. All right. So game leaders, Trevor Lawrence, 18 for 33, 169 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns. Trevor Lawrence in 4 games has yet to throw for 200 passing yards, and he hasn't won a start since the week of Thanksgiving last year. C.J. Stroud, 27 for 40, 345 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns. His best game of the season so far. Tank Bigsby, no Tank Dell for the Texans. Who was expecting the Tank versus Tank game, but no Tank Dell. Bigsby was killing it for the Jags, 7 carries for 90 rushing yards. Cam Akers, no Joe Mixon, no Dameon Pierce. He did a good job, 13 carries, 53 rushing yards. Brian Thomas with 6 receptions for 86 receiving yards, 1 touchdown. Really like him. He's been very impressive. One of the only impressive things this Jacksonville Jaguars team. Nico, on the other end, was outstanding, 12 receptions for 151 receiving yards and a touchdown for the Texans. Let's go over some other stats in this game. ETN had 11 carries for 50 rushing yards. The rookie Thomas had 13 rushing yards. Dare Ngobalowe had 7 rushing yards. Stroud ran for 17. J.J. Taylor, coming in from the practice squad, had 6 carries for 18 rushing yards. Now, the reception I was talking about for Dare, a 31-yard reception on a 3rd and 18. He had 4 receptions for 47 receiving yards and 1 touchdown. Man, was he big in this game. Diggs, like I mentioned, he had a solid day. 5 receptions, 69 receiving yards. He had the 6-yard touchdown run. Just with how good Nico Collins and C.J. Stroud were in this game, just, a little bit underviewed of Stephon Diggs' day. He had a good day. Dalton Schultz made some nice catches late in this game, 3 receptions for 34 receiving yards. Cade Stover had a very nice 27-yard reception. Robert Woods had a 10-yard catch. John Mechie had a 1 reception on a 7-yard run on a screen pass, and J.J. Taylor was targeted once but did not catch it. So 27 receptions for the receiving core with 345 receiving yards. Of course, though, since C.J. Stroud threw for 345. Like I mentioned, Steven Sims did fumble in this game. That was the only fumble lost for them. It was recovered by Daniel Thomas. Jacksonville did fumble in this game. Trevor Lawrence fumbled, but it was recovered by Travis Etienne Jr. All right, let's go to some defensive stats. Henry To'o led the Texans in tackles with 7. Only 1 sack for the Texans in this game. That was Eric Murray. They had a total of 3 tackles for loss, so defense wasn't amazing. They did good. They had some good plays. They had the 4th down stop. Outside the sack for Eric Murray, outside of the 4th down stop, there wasn't a lot of great plays by this defense today, if you ask me. But a tackle for loss for Kamari Lassiter, a tackle for loss for Tim Settle Jr., and of course the tackle for loss with Eric Murray getting the sack. Kamari Lassiter had 6 tackles. Kalen Bullock had 5. Azeez Al-Shahir had 4. 4 for Tim Settle as well. Jalen Petrie had 4. Eric Murray had 4. Derek Stingley had 4. Mario Edwards Jr. had 3. A bunch of players had 2, and a bunch of players had 1. No interceptions in this game, though, for either teams. So, yeah, this was a crazy game. This was a sloppy win, a win I want to put behind me. It's not often that I, as a Texans fan, when they get a win, I want them to put this game behind them because this was an ugly game. I think C.J. Stroud and Nico Collins were amazing in this game. Dre Ngabalawe and Stephon Diggs did really good, but the defense needs to make improvements. The offensive line needs to for sure make improvements with Buffalo coming into town next week. Good win, but it wasn't a great win, and the Texans need to be better if they want to improve to 4-1 against Buffalo next week. That's the video. Hope you guys enjoyed, and peace out. Go Texans.